This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 693, Love Letter to Teachers, Boundaries, Good Health, and Encouragement with Shannon Reed, sponsored by Advancement Courses. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Now more than ever, we educators need something to help us de-stress and rest for a while. This episode is like a love letter to teachers, or a cup of cool water on a parched soul. Vicki's guest, Shannon Reed, knows all about the importance of setting boundaries and self-care. With over 20 years as a teacher under her belt, including her multiple roles at a Brooklyn public high school, she has built an enormous toolbox of teacher tips and encouragement. Her written and professional contributions include pieces for The New Yorker, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, The Paris Review, Slate, The Washington Post, among many others. Shannon is now a lecturer in creative writing at the University of Pittsburgh. Let's join Vicki and Shannon right now. Enjoy!
Hello, remarkable educators. Do you have a Donors Choose project that needs funding? Tune in at the end of the episode to learn how you can get your project funded through today's sponsor, Advancement Courses. Thank you to Advancement Courses for sponsoring today's episode. Today we're talking with Shannon Reed, author of Why Did I Get a B and Other Mysteries We're Discussing in the Faculty Lounge. Well, Shannon, we've got lots of mystery since you wrote this book, but as we're working with going back to school amidst the pandemic and what that looks like, but your message is a timeless one that we all need to hear. Your love letter to teachers and telling teachers you're not alone. What's your message to teachers right now as they're dealing with so many different things?
Oh my goodness, what a time. I definitely just want to send as much support and care to teachers as possible. I wrote this book, of course, way before COVID-19, but as you say, it really is a love letter to teachers and education and anyone who's working in a school and working with kids. And I just wish I could give everybody a socially distanced hug and just let them know, like, you're not alone. This is hard for everyone. We're all trying to figure out how to do this with our students' best interest at heart and to protect everybody and keep everybody safe. I think one of the things that's hardest about teaching as a profession is that even though you're around people all the time, you're around your classroom of students, you can feel very isolated. You don't necessarily have time to talk to your colleagues or other adults in the school. And that's just magnified for people who are working from home or people who are working by themselves in a classroom to remote students. So you need to look out for each other and care for each other. And you're not doing something wrong if you find this incredibly stressful and frustrating.
Yes, and our job is so very important. And in many ways, teachers feel like it's a very hazardous job right now, just because, it's so easy for children to be asymptomatic. Not that they always are, but it's so hard to know when we're being exposed or when we're not. So what do you say to the teachers who are scared or nervous or anxious or just all the emotions? Because we always feel this anyway. We're always anxious before we go back to school, and now we have this on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I read in my book about how even though I'm a college professor now and my year actually starts before Labor Day weekend, on Labor Day weekend, I always have this pit of dread in my stomach of just like the anxiety of the new school year starting. And that's just in a normal, everyday kind of year, not a year like right now. So absolutely. I mean, I do think it's really important to remember that our work is not meaningless work. It has a purpose. And just interacting with our students is helping them grow into the people we want them to be in some way. I know that a lot of us are going to get frustrated about the difficulties of teaching remotely or not having all of our students in the room or not being able to do activities that we know work really well to teach certain kinds of content. And we're just not going to be able to do that this year. Plus you have all the pressure from parents and administrators and our own families about staying safe and keeping everybody healthy. But just remembering that being in a room with our students and trying to help them move a little bit forward on the path of education is really important, vital work. And if we're able to do that in a small way, then we are doing the work of teaching, even though it doesn't look like a typical year or a normal year. And for me, I find that very empowering, that the work I'm doing is meaningful and does help to create, people who can be functional and helpful in the world, takes away some of the fear that I sometimes feel in a classroom. You mentioned that we deal with these things. We've been dealing with this kind of issues of danger and security for a long time. Like, people have been scared about having active shooters in their schools, in their classroom. Teachers have been dealing with that for many, many years now. Unfortunately, that's not new. And how I get past that is the feeling of what I'm doing is creating some good in the world, even if it's a relatively small good.
So that's sort of your pep talk you give to yourself. I mean, as you've gone through this time and you've gotten ready to come back for the fall and you want to make sure your students are learning, what are the things you say to yourself to get up the energy to keep going?
So the University of Pittsburgh, where I teach, went to remote learning with about 4 weeks left in the spring semester. And I got into the practice of emailing all of my classes on Monday morning. And it was an email of like, here's when things are due, here's how we're going to do this, like very much a functional email. But I also found myself saying things like, hey, I just wanted you to know that I'm scared too. And this is one of the ways I dealt with it. I went for a long walk yesterday and I thought about it. And I found that my students were really responding to just the humanity of those emails. Different teachers are teaching students at different levels. Not everyone can respond to a long email like that. But I think that's really helpful to remember that I'm not just teaching students, I'm teaching other human beings, and other human beings can be scared and help me with my fear, and I can help them with their fear, and we can be there for each other. And I find that tremendously motivating, like the actual relationships I have with the people who are in my classroom is extremely empowering to me.
It is motivating, but there's also, like you said, that anxiety. And so for quite some time, taught to my fellow teachers about be careful to try not to be the flashpoint because there's just so much pressure and it's a hard time. And it's easy to not keep perspective that, okay, so this person wants this right now, but they may have to wait a little while. I think folks have gotten so myopic and self-centered. I mean, how do we deal with these pressures that everybody has an opinion and everybody believes their opinion is the way it needs to be done?
I really strongly believe in setting boundaries for myself. I personally just hit a point in the evening where I am no longer at my best functioning and I'm not going to be helpful to much of anyone. And I am just done. I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to answer text messages. They can wait unless it's an emergency. It can wait until the next day. Other people don't need time boundaries. They maybe need attention boundaries or geographic boundaries or something like that. But I think it is so important in handling our anxiety, which you're right is incredibly, incredibly overpowering right now, is to just set those firm boundaries and don't go past them. Even if you feel like, oh, I could keep working or I could take care of it. I'm not particularly upset right now. Just say, no, it's 7 o'clock. I am done for the evening. Or no, I have driven 10 miles from my school building and that is when I stop and switch to something else. You just kind of have to parent yourself in some ways and make sure that you're giving yourself that space. It's incredibly hard. People demand so much of teachers and they would take every spare minute from us if they could. So you have to do it for yourself.
Well, it is job creep. I mean, I worked hard all day on some stuff and, from distance learning, everybody on the planet, it feels like has my cell phone and I get a text message from a parent. And the setting those boundaries is so hard, but isn't that part of what we're going to have to do if we have a healthy way forward?
I think so. And I think it's also important for my students to see that it's okay to set boundaries and that they can do it someday too. My students work into the night, they're college students, so they will email me at 11:30 at night. And if I'm awake, there's a strong chance that in the past that I would have just been like, oh, well, I read this email, I guess I'll deal with it. But I think it's actually great for them to know, like, you haven't done something wrong to email me at 11:30, but I'm not going to answer this email until I'm up and at my best again tomorrow morning. And that's completely fine. It's okay to set those boundaries. It's good role modeling for students as well.
Well, and we have sustainability and good health. And, there's things you can't undo. You can't undo the result of massive stress if you completely burn yourself out. So as we finish, Shannon, is there anything in your book that you feel like is, as you reread it, this is relevant to just this moment right now and teachers need to hear it? What would that be?
The very first part of my book, the preface to the book, I retell the story of what was probably my lowest moment as a public high school teacher. I don't want to ruin the entire chapter for readers, but I walked away from a class and I just abandoned them. And I was laying on the floor of my classroom sobbing, and I just felt incredibly alone and incredibly unhappy. And I realized that I just did not want teachers to feel alone in the work that they're doing, and that I needed to reach out to friends, reach out to family, reach out to my colleagues, and just make connections, not necessarily to vent or complain about my work, but just to make connections and talk to people as another adult talking to adults instead of a teacher talking to students at all time. So yeah, I would reach for that again and again. Like, who are your people who you can talk to, not necessarily about in terms of complaining about your job or talking about relieving stress, but just have a conversation about the bird that came to the feeder that day, or the television show that you like, or life that is beyond the classroom in some way. Don't define yourself solely as being a teacher, because if you do that, other people will do that too, and that is not healthy for you.
Okay, so the book is Why Did I Get a B and Other Mysteries We're Discussing in the Faculty Lounge by Shannon Reed. And teachers, I hope that you are encouraged to set boundaries. I like the idea, Shannon, of parenting yourself, but also how important your job is. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Vicki. It was a pleasure.
Advancement Courses is a leader in online professional development with over 280 courses in 20 different subjects, including topics like online instruction, social emotional learning, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. This back-to-school season, they are partnering with Donors Choose and donating 10% of all sales to help fund projects every day until September 25th. Visit advancementcourses.com/give to learn more and submit your project for a chance to get funded. Thank you, Advancement Courses, for sponsoring this show.